Greetings, NFL fans. It is Tuesday, February 24th. I am Jay Busbee here with Frank Schwab and Eric Edholm. Kevin Kaduk is off getting ready for his pro day right now. But you two gentlemen just came back from Indianapolis, survived the cold, survived the weather, survived the airport terminals, and you're back from the combine. So that's what we want to talk about today. I'm going to turn it over to you guys right off the bat here. First, big story, Winston versus Mariota. Each one of you give me your take on the storylines and who came out better in this deal.
Well, I think, being there and listening to Jameis Winston, and I know all the stuff in his past, so I'm not arguing that. And when I say this, he was really impressive. Like, I don't buy into the whole intangibles thing, like you need to be a leader of men and stuff like that. But if you put Jameis Winston in your locker room or even, these 15-minute interviews or Marcus Mariota in these 15-minute interviews, there's one guy who you say, yeah, that guy can lead a football team, and it's Jameis Winston. And I know probably a lot of his stuff is, what would we say, BS in the industry, but he's very charismatic. He came off very confident. He came off like you'd want a quarterback to come off. And I think he's number one pick until further notice. I just have a hard time believing the Buccaneers are passing him, especially when Lovie Smith comes out and says, about his off-field stuff, hey, he was exonerated on all of that. It doesn't matter. We're fine with his off-the-field stuff. If you remove the off-the-field stuff, then it kind of becomes an easy choice, and it's going to be Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, and I talked to an offensive coordinator not on the Buccaneers, somebody who probably isn't going to be in a position to draft him. He said, he's really sharp with the football stuff. He gets the X and O's. He's got a mind of a coordinator, but the fact that he sort of has this smiling, happy-go-lucky thing when they were sort of firing what they thought were serious questions at him, it kind of irked him, kind of rubbed him the wrong way. So I think he still has some growing up to do, but Frank's right. There's no comparison in the charm department. He's a much more engaging personality than Marcus is.
He was really impressive. I mean, he was really it was like I wanted to buy a used car from the guy when he was done. It was like, wow, this Jameis Winston, yeah, I'm on board. It was very, again, I think that quote unquote winning the press conferences and that is kind of dumb, but I thought he quote unquote won the press conference. He really did. And I came away, probably thinking, Jameis is going to probably survive all this stuff about, all of his off-field red flags.
Frank, what can we do to put you in this new Chevy Nova?
He'd be great at that. Let's put it to you this way. If his NFL career bombs out, he'll be selling something to us. I'm sure of that.
The knock on combine interviews is always that, or the combine itself is that over the course of the interviews, the physical challenges, and so forth, all it does is give teams a chance to go and find something wrong, more and more wrong with the player. And then so that by the time of the draft, we've decided these guys are all serial killers in waiting. What do you see about Winston and Mariota that could slide in that direction?
I think if there's anything with Mariota, it's going to be that he just really has never run a pro offense. Like, he stood up there. I mean, this kind of blew me away, even though I knew it. Somebody asked him, what's the biggest challenge for you in transitioning to the NFL? And he said, I think it's huddling up. And he was dead serious. And you think about it, it's like, well, yeah, he's never done that. He's literally never been in a huddle. They never huddled. This is not something he's ever done. So that answer alone kind of shined a light on the fact that he's got a long way to go to really be an NFL-ready quarterback. And with Mariota, I wonder if it's the shoulder. There's a lot of stories coming out that his shoulder's bad, and even, he kind of downplayed it a lot, and so did his quarterbacks coach, George Whitfield, who was there. But, I don't think that this is just made up out of thin air. Is there something wrong with his shoulder, probably from pitching, which he's a great relief pitcher at Florida State, obviously. I think that would be, the medicals on him are going to be important, because if there's one thing that might send him sliding, it's, hey, this guy's shoulder might be a little dinged.
Yeah, I think people with, Teddy Bridgewater as an example last year, he's not a leader of men, and all these stories came out about he doesn't have that engaging personality. You could see that same thing coming out with Mariota. It was funny to hear and read reports about, he's killing the interviews behind closed doors. He's such a charismatic kid, and other people saying, he's not that dynamic. He's quiet. He's introverted. So
that's who he is, and he's a nice kid. He's a really, really good kid.
Yep, and maybe his personality becomes under more scrutiny than you ever thought it would.
By the way, so Teddy Bridgewater from now on is going to be like the bizarro Mike Mamula, right? The guy who we always point to and say, why, what Jay just talked about, teams finding ways to pick guys apart. That's Teddy Bridgewater. That's what happened. I mean, there's no way that guy should have gone 32nd. But he's going to be the guy we're talking about 10 years from now where we say, well, don't forget Teddy Bridgewater. He shouldn't have gone 32nd, but Combine and Pro Day.
Yeah, it's a handy shorthand for that. Now, obviously, we've got the perfect duality there in Winston and Mariota. That's the big star power storyline. Then you've got the freaks in Chris Conley and Byron Jones, these guys that come out of nowhere, and you see their performances. Outside, though, of those storylines, what was the biggest storyline to each of you guys the weekend? Eric, what did you find was the biggest storyline that you were following throughout the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was cool when you see guys like Vic Beasley, who, we watched in college last year, and he's been heating up the edges for a couple of years now. He's one of the best college sack producers the last couple of years, but we said, hey, there's no way that's going to fly in the NFL at 220, 225 pounds. Well, he shows up weighing 246, and everybody says, whoa, buddy, that's too much, or that's not going to work. And what does he do? He goes out there and puts on a show. And so he just might be one of those exceptions who can – put on weight easily and still maintain that athleticism. Is it a feel-good story? I don't know, but he's been knocked down a lot for a guy who averaged about a sack a game in college against, some pretty good programs like FSU. So, I can't wait to see where he ends up. I suspect it's going to be fairly high, whereas a month ago people were saying maybe second round because, 220, 225 doesn't fly in the NFL. I think he's going to be fine.
To me, it was, I sat there the first day I was there in Indy and listened to a lot of NFL teams. They bring all the general managers and coaches out for press conferences. And it was amazing to me how many talked about needing a quarterback or like uncertainty, quarterback like John Fox. He wouldn't commit to Jay Cutler, blah, blah, blah. A lot of teams are looking for a quarterback. And then on the next day, the quarterbacks come out. And Mariota says the thing about not huddling. Bryce Petty says, yeah, the Senior Bowl is awesome because I got to call a play for the first time in my life. Like, what? Like, oh, yeah, that's right. You don't call plays. You just look at a board and kick your foot. And, and Brett Hundley, who's the third quarterback in this, or either him or Petty, probably third quarterback. Hundley's, talking about having questions about he was a one read and run guy. And he's like, well, it was our offense. If that guy wasn't there, that's what I'm supposed to do, but I can stand in the pocket. And it just leads me to believe that this quarter, we're going to have a quarterback crisis at some point. And that's overstating, and I'm sorry. But at some point, who are the quarterbacks who are filling the shoes of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Drew Brees and all these guys, Phillip Rivers, because all these quarterbacks come out of college and they're not ready. They've run nothing compared to an NFL offense.
That's a fascinating idea that 5 years from now we could have these quarterbacks who the overall production could be that much lower. Do you think that it's going to be something that we see reflected in the play on the field?
Yes, I don't see any way around it unless, you're taking a guy like, Marcus Mariota has all the physical gifts. He's an unbelievable athlete, and he's a very productive college quarterback, and he did all the things that Oregon needed him to do. But he has not run an NFL offense, and he's not played in the pocket, and he's not even huddled up, and he's not called to play. And in a perfect world, he would be given a year to, Carson Palmer type of redshirt year to learn the NFL game. But that doesn't happen anymore, and it's not going to happen for him. And there's I wouldn't trust Brett Hundley or Bryce Petty, nothing against those guys, but those guys don't strike me as future NFL stars. So where are the quarterbacks coming from? And even the quarterbacks who are quote unquote, good, these great athletes with the big arms, they're not ready to play in the NFL. And I think it's just going to get worse and worse. And like I said, there are a bunch of teams at the Combine who were talking about, what they're going to do at quarterback.
Is this the point where I'm supposed to point out that Tom Brady was a 6th-round draft pick and he's going to people sneak in to the draft? Or
Spurgeon Wynn was a 6th-round. Spurgeon Wynn was a 6th-round draft pick too. There's more Spurgeon Wynns than Tom Brady's. I'll tell you that.
Eric, who did you see that you thought really damaged their prospects for going forward?
It's a good question. It's funny because, even for a player like Dorial Green-Beckham, who I think tested well, 2 sub-4, 540s, the rumors of his poor interviews behind closed doors with NFL teams, that concerns you because, teams have to feel comfortable that, A, he's not going to get in trouble like he did at Missouri, multiple marijuana incidents, the incident with pushing a girl down a flight of stairs got him kicked out. But also the question of, does he have that football IQ? Is he going to be committed? Is he going to, stick to a weight program, things like that? So he's more of an intangible loser in that case. if you want sort of more of the tangible stuff, a guy like David Cobb coming off a great Senior Bowl, really established himself as a good-looking prospect, then goes out there and kind of pulls his hammy and runs a 4.8. Now, obviously, that time doesn't mean much in a vacuum because he'll run again at some point. But, really the running backs as a whole are underwhelming. Gurley was hurt. Tevin Coleman was hurt. Melvin Gordon ran a 4.52, which is fine because he plays at that speed, but nobody really, other than Jeremy Langford, really blazed in the 40-yard dash. The other workouts were good, but not great. So, what looks like a good running back group, I think, probably didn't move forward very much with what they did in the workouts.
Yeah, let's talk about Gurley for a second there because he did draw a little bit of notice for refusing to have his knee examined. Was that the Twitter reports that I saw were that people were aghast and this kind of thing is simply not done? Was it that big of a deal to you guys?
What I heard was that the Gurley camp had sort of heard rumors of this Tyler Kroft kid, the tight end out of Rutgers, who had an ankle injury that was 3 or 4 years old or something. And in being tweaked and torqued by a doctor, they kind of re-injured this, sort of picked off this old wound, if you will, this old scab that hadn't hurt him in a couple of years. And them sort of just inspecting the ankle re-injured it. And Gurley's people said, no way that's happening with us. So that's the rumor, at least, that I heard. So, I just think it's probably one of those things that if he goes back to the medical recheck in Indy a month from now, does the same thing in his pro day, tests okay there, he'll be fine. I suspect it was sort of much ado about nothing, but that's just my take.
That the thing about it is, these NFL teams treat these players like meat. Like, that's what they all say. It's a meat market. Well, of course, at some point there's going to be a brushback on that. Like, the NFL can't just sit there and put them through these ridiculous medicals and expect they're just going to keep doing it. No complaints ever. Somebody like a Todd Gurley is going to say, "No, my knee's screwed up. I'm not going to let you twist and turn it and mess with my knee anymore." Hey, trust what you see on the MRIs, I guess. So I didn't really blame him that much for that because it's the combine is kind of ridiculous in that way. Going back to the losers zone, and I thought the running backs as a whole were the losers because here we are, and we're talking about no running backs for the last 2 years in the NFL draft, and who really stands out in this? I mean, you got Gurley, who's coming off an ACL. If he didn't, he'd obviously be a first-round pick. I think he's still a first-round pick, but boy, it's a little bit of a risk. And then Melvin Gordon runs terribly for a guy who his entire game is this breakaway Jamal Charles type of speed that you see on the field. For him to run such a poor 40, slower than Dorial Green Beckham, well, it's probably not a first-rounder anymore. So where are the running backs again in this draft?
We've heard the lines about somehow all of these players have gotten slower in the 40 than they were back in high school when they were getting recruited by colleges. With that in mind, what do these guys have to do to redeem themselves at their pro day? Do they have to just run a faster time? Do they have to now vault even more and prove that that it was just a one-time fluke?
That's a good question. Yeah, and I've seen guys have, big discrepancies between their 40, 0.2 of a second sometimes. I mean, that's rare, but you've seen it happen in the past. And if a guy does run much better on his, on his own campus, it certainly doesn't hurt him. And I think that can kind of remove a little bit of the sting in the scouting community and where they say, okay, we can chalk up Indy as he just had a bad day. But, yeah, I mean, If you, I think it was Jarvis Landry last year ran in like the high 4.6s or 4.7s as a wide receiver with not a big frame. People were like, "Whoa, dude, he's all of a sudden a day 3 pick." Comes back healthier at his pro day, runs in the 4.5s, and guess what? It was a very productive rookie receiver because he's a good player. So, Dolphins felt better about it knowing that they watched the tape and that he ran well at his pro day.
I kind of think that good front offices are able to almost take advantage of that let's use Melvin Gordon for an example. When Melvin Gordon runs poorly, they go back to the film and they see a guy who plays football fast, to use that worn-out term, and they probably are more comfortable taking him knowing that they trust what they see on film instead of what he ran in a 40. But yet again, I don't know. If Melvin Gordon goes to his pro day and runs another 4.5, 4.6, whatever, it might cause teams to pause because if he doesn't have the speed, is he really a great first round type of back? I don't know. It's going to be a tough eval for him.
If you were setting up a combine of NFL writers, what would be the equivalent of the 40-yard dash for you? The event that you just have to nail.
Words per minute, transcription times.
Not asking something that starts with talk
yes.
about.
Yeah, right. To go a whole day without invoking a talk about, that would be pretty tough.
That's a good one. What are y'all's 40 times? Have you ever done? I can't remember ever doing the 40. What was your time?
I ran a 40 and 5 flat in high school, and I'm actually proud of that because I'm pretty slow.
Look at that.
I was in the 5.3 range. I would run out of gas at about the 28.5-yard mark, and I played tight end one year. I played offensive line another year, so that kind of fits in with what a underdeveloped, non-athletic high school player might run.
I bet your 3-cone was great, though. Your 3-cone.
Oh, man. The short area quickness was mind-blowing. You wouldn't even believe it.
All right. So you guys are probably not going to get paid by the NFL, but
Nope.
What player outside of the obvious big names really stepped up, really is going to get paid this year?
I'll give you two that I think of. I mean, Dante Fowler, there had been a ton of momentum with him, the defensive end out of Florida. There are teams that like him better than Randy Gregory. There are teams that like him better than Shane Ray. I feel pretty good about him fitting in either a 4-3 or a 3-4, and he blew the roof off the place in the workout too. So sign him up. I think he's a top 5 pick, and I also think Kevin White may have moved. Even on some people's boards ahead of Amari Cooper, I think he might be the best receiver. And again, the workout just supplements what you've seen, and he was a beast on the field this year. I mean, especially early in the season, he was unbelievable. They started throwing every defensive player on him, double teaming, bracket coverage, whatever they could do to stop him, and he still produced. So Kevin White, considering this kid was being recruited by like Bowling Green, Hawaii, West Virginia, Texas Tech 2 years ago out of JUCO, to now be a possible top 5 pick, it's a pretty incredible story.
It really is, and he came off well. And by the way, Dante Fowler, you talk about a charismatic dude. He was really, when we met with him, media, he was great. I could see him blowing away the interviews too. And with teams,
tell the Bucks line. Tell him what he said about the.
So I'm gonna get it wrong, but he grew up in Tampa. And somebody asked him, "Well, did you grow up a Bucks fan?" And he was like, well. The Bucks are the Bucks.
Yeah,
it just blew. Everybody started laughing. The guy, and it's a guy who you brought up, Eric, and I'm interested in talking a little more about him because he fascinates me. But Dorial Green Beckham, and I always get it wrong. I always say Beckham Green, so excuse me if I get it wrong here. But Dorial Green Beckham is a guy who, when he came in, I think I've done about 8 combines now. And usually you expect people to look like they do, I know that this is a big guy, I know this is a small guy. He came in and I was like, my God, this guy's a monster. Like he reminded me, and I know the comparison's been made 100 times, of when I saw Calvin Johnson. And I was like, the story, I think I've told it here on this podcast, when I walked into that room where the press conferences happened in 2007 or whenever this was, I was like, wow, who's that defensive end everybody's talking to? And I got closer. I saw it was a receiver, and I was like, who is this? Oh, my God, that's Calvin Johnson? That's Calvin Johnson? Like, he was that big. And the same deal with Dorial. He looked huge to me, and he ran really, really well. And now I'm wondering, I can't. I know physically he's great, and we can look at the film from Missouri and see that, but what about the off-field stuff? He was really nervous in the interview with the media. You could tell he was coached to say certain things, and he was really, and I'd be nervous too. I just don't know where he goes, but he's a guy to me that if you trust your organization and you're not going to be, the Browns letting Josh Gordon, go off a bad path. If you trust in your organization to keep him on the right path and keep him focused, he's a guy who could be a heck of an NFL player, don't you think?
I do, yeah. Seeing him out in Arizona the week before the Super Bowl, I went out there to Exos where he was training, and I mean, it just looked like a thoroughbred. Just him running long strides, but still moves incredibly well. He's still raw. He's got a long way to go, but boy, I mean, he could be better than Kelvin Benjamin. I mean, he
was just who popped in my mind. Yeah.
Yep.
And Kelvin Benjamin was really good.
Who's the standard bearer for that guy who had the off-field issues in college, but then turned it around? And we would have said
Moss.
Warren Sapp, but are you think Randy Moss?
Janoris Jenkins, yeah.
Yeah, Janoris was another one. But Randy Moss, me and Charles Robinson of Yahoo actually argued about this that day. Because I was, talking about Dorial, and he said, basically his tack is you don't take a guy like that because they don't turn things around. And I said, Dez. And then I said, well, actually Randy Moss, because, Kevin Dyson went ahead of Randy Moss because people were worried about the off-fields. And now, you look, and Randy Moss is a Hall of Famer, maybe a top 5 receiver of all time, and he fell to the 20s because nobody wanted him because of what happened off the field.
All right. So I saw a tweet that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but about year 2000, as recently as then, there were only a couple of dozen guys covering this thing. Now there were well over 1,000 people credentialed. So give people an idea of what it's like to cover this combine, what you guys went through, how you handled stories, how you did something different from the rest of the pack. What did you guys do?
It's hard to do something.
A quick story. It's funny when people ask me about the NFL Combine, they assume a lot of them do, unless they're hardcore football fans, but they assume we sit in the stands and watch the workouts.
Right.
And there are only a handful of pool reporters who are allowed in there. Instead, as Frank can attest, even though I wasn't there this year, he was, but you're sitting in what amounts to a cafeteria at Lucas Oil, like where people eat their French fries on game day, and they bring players out to podiums, they bring coaches and GMs out there, and it's like 1,200 people all told, jammed into an area that fire marshals would scream allows no more than 300. So it's weird.
It's basically, for the media aspect of it, it's 4 days of the press conference stuff in that room. You get guys off to the side in the hallway there, outside. It used to be done in a convention center where you used to kind of post up in the hallway because the coaches could avoid you a lot more easily. But the coaches had to come through this hallway, this really long hallway, and so you caught them on the way in and out. And it's with so many people there and so much going on. Actually, press conference wise, it's hard to get anything different. Really, maybe your take is a little bit different here and there. You write things a certain way, but yeah, it's just 4 days of listening to coaches, general managers, and college players talk. It is. I've covered, like I said, about 8 combines. I've never seen a guy run a 40. Never. Not one time have I seen anybody in Indianapolis run a 40-yard dash, except maybe the media when they open up the lunch line. But it's a weird event. It's a really, really weird event to cover because what fans see at home on NFL Network, basically it's the same exact thing we see because we're not allowed into workouts, except we get to talk to everybody. We get access to all the players, general managers, and coaches.
And frankly, I would say the Combine has taken a step down ever since they moved it out of the old dome and the convention center. Yeah. Because there would always be that cheerleading convention that would happen at the same time. So there would be like thousands of cheerleaders from schools around the country all in the same room as a bunch of over-caffeinated and overweight media members lurking and stalking in the hallways.
That sounds like
creepy.
Yes, that sounds like a bad 30 for 30 waiting to happen.
By the way, the Combine, it's just, I'm not complaining about my job. I love my job, but the Combine's not fun. There's nothing about the Combine that's like, yes, I get to go to the Combine.
I wasn't going to lead you there, but I was wondering, yeah.
It's 7 degrees. There's a billion people there, a lot of them asking very dumb questions. You're just listening to guys drone on and on and on. You're not watching. I mean, there's not a game to cover, it's just kind of being there, but that's fine. It is what it is, and the Combine's become a huge, event. Again, the NFL just winning the day in that there's nothing going on in sports right now. The NFL throws out its Combine and everybody's talking about it because nothing else is going on. People are starved for something to talk about.
I felt awful for you guys down among the palm trees of Daytona. I was heartbroken seeing all that word of snow and flight delays and so forth.
Oh yeah.
So final question here because I got to get you guys out of here. I know you got to roll, but. What would you do to change the Combine? And I'm talking not just from our media access coverage, but from the way that it's put together, the way that it services the players and or the teams.
I would, I would make it a little more. I get why they do this, but it's almost like basic training in the media and in the military, and that's a dumb comparison because we're comparing football and the military. But bear with me, just in that, I think that. They just want to make it as hard on you as totally possible. Charles Robinson wrote about this the other day, about citing an anonymous agent saying how ridiculous they make it on you mentally and physically. And I just don't know why we got to treat them that way. What point is there? They're grown men. They're, why are we trying to break their will on some of these medical things and stuff? I think it could be a little more humane of a process, but it is what it is. I think the Combine's fine because people overreact to what the Combine is. Everybody's like, oh, the Combine's meaningless. We shouldn't pay any attention but some dumb teams are going to draft Chris Conley based on his good form. Nobody does that. It's a one piece of the puzzle. Everybody knows 10-20% of what you're doing, and film is the rest. So I don't think the combine really needs to change that much. Just maybe make it a little more professional, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, that's a good question, boy. I like what you said, Frank, and I think, yeah, obviously it is great made for TV stuff, and people always say they're not going to sort of change their boards based on what happens there, but inevitably happens, and
sure. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes that does happen where you're like, wow, this guy, I need to go re-look the film again because he ran a 4.2. Let me look at the film again, and he ends up turning out to be a good player.
Well, it's almost like the NCAA tournament when some guy has an amazing, Bryce Drew comes and hits an amazing shot, and all of a sudden he gets a pro look. So, but it sounds like it's not to that extent unless the team is really desperate for attention.
It's really rare. Unless it's the Raiders of the Al Davis days. That's about it. I mean, that was kind of everybody looks at, even like a Chris Conley who had a great workout, Georgia receiver. All that means is he gets another look. It doesn't mean he's going to be a first-round pick, even though he had a great combine. But, like, Vernon Davis is a great example of a guy who went to the combine. He was a good player. Everybody knew he was a really, really good player at Maryland. Went to the combine, destroyed it. Had literally maybe the best combine of all time. He's unbelievable. He ran like a 4.38 at 260 pounds, and that moved him up the draft board. And you know what? Vernon Davis had a really, really good career, so I don't see there being a problem with that.
There you go. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your service. Thank you for making the trip to Indianapolis and for bringing back
fun.
all of this information.
So much fun, Jay. So much fun.
It's amazing how much attention this draws. So yeah, it's good to have people on the ground there. All right, we'll wrap it up there. We'll be back next week talking more footballness because there's always something to discuss with the NFL. For Frank Schwab and Eric Edholm, I am Jay Busbee, and we will see you next week.